Let's all stand for the pledge, please.
President Daly? Oh, can't hear you, President Daly.
I am here.
Thank you. Vice President Headland?
Here.
Trustee Clements?
Here.
Trustee McNall?
Here.
And Trustee Parr?
Here.
Thanks for joining this special Thursday night meeting. Our next meeting will be regularly scheduled on Tuesday, February 23rd at 7 p.m. in the auditorium. Dr. Benante, it sounds like we have a COVID update on our agenda. Is that true?
It's to provide an update as it relates to the item that's on the agenda today. So it is.
Okay, very good. All right, so I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Benante.
Sure. First, thank you, Jen, for coordinating our meeting this evening. I know it was unanticipated, and thanks to our board members who were able to come together, 8 o'clock on a Thursday night. I appreciate your time. As I mentioned on Tuesday night, we were in the process of getting ready to begin athletics, but there has been a bit of a scramble over the last 2 days to make sense of some updated guidance that we received from the Department of Health. So I just want to walk you through for a few minutes a series of communications. I did provide these to you via email yesterday. The first is on Sunday. I received a communication from the Department of Health that had indicated that high-risk sports may resume and that the Putnam County Department of Health was authorizing Putnam schools to make the decision to commence seasonal sports. So this was anticipated. We were expected to receive this at some point, which we interpreted as the formal approval from our local Department of Health to begin sports on Monday. Now, as you know, on Monday and on Tuesday, we had snow days, but all that being said, we were ready to begin on Monday, and our coaches and our student athletes were prepared to participate. We had been working in the previous weeks to make sure that we had various safety protocols in place. Tuesday evening, right before our board meeting, I received an updated guidance document from the Putnam County Department of Health, which create quite a stir. And again, I'm not faulting them in any way. I know our local Department of Health was not anticipating having been in a position to approve or make any decision related to athletics. Again, they did not have to in the fall, but since indoor sports are considered to be high risk by the State Department of Health, this was something that was handed to them. And I know from a health perspective, a health and safety perspective, they wanted to make sure that there were certain assurances in place for the schools that the schools could make in order for our students to safely participate. And that's what we received on Tuesday. Part of that included the school board or the superintendent essentially consenting to athletics beginning. And part of that is what we're here for today. In the short term, I did not feel the need to stop athletics from beginning since they were already ready to begin, and the Department of Health did not indicate in conversation with them that it was a requirement of the school board to act on a resolution in order for us to start since we were ready to go. I did have a conference call with them on Wednesday morning to clarify that. So I did allow our students to begin yesterday. However, I did feel it important to connect with Jen and to connect with you so that I wasn't independently making this decision, although there's been many decisions that have been made through this pandemic at times by superintendents. I do think this is one that we want to make sure our Board of Education is comfortable with if the kids are going to continue to participate. In addition to that requirement, the Department of Health has indicated that each player must have a physical prior to resuming high-risk sports. Also, parents must provide their informed consent. So we must notify parents of the potential risks of having their children participate in athletics, and they must sign off that they've acknowledged what those risks are. The school, we have a code of conduct that the Department of Health felt was necessary for students to review, which establishes that they are going to follow appropriate health and safety protocols, not only on campus, but also outside of campus as well. That which would include not gathering, not participating in large gatherings and the like, obviously masking up and practicing social distancing whenever they're off campus as well. So our students, in order to practice today, were required, we received that yesterday, so we provided it to them yesterday. They're required to affirm that they've reviewed it, and their families are required to affirm that they've reviewed it and provide signature, and we're retaining copies of those as the Department of Health has requested. That's pretty much the gist of the additional requirements that the Department of Health had indicated in their follow-up guidance that was provided to schools on Tuesday. I feel comfortable that we've put all of these things in place as of today, and that we're taking the necessary precautions in consideration of other guidance that's been provided to us to make our facilities and in the manner in which our kids practice, and compete as safe as it can be. There's, as with any time our kids are participating in athletics, there's always going to be some risk involved. The potential risks in this case are unique, given the potential for spread of COVID. At the same time, our coaches in the fall and our coaches through their winter workouts, which were allowed through January, have demonstrated, and our students have demonstrated that they're taking that seriously. And I feel comfortable saying that until we have reason to believe that our kids and our teams can't safely participate, we at some point have to give them the opportunity to do so. And I feel comfortable with the precautions that we've taken. Mr. Romanino and Ms. Crow, Ms. O'Hara have all been working very closely with our coaches to ensure that they understand what's going to be required here, and that our student athletes understand what's being required of them as well. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or delve into that any sooner, in any more detail, before we move on to any board action.
I just had a quick question. There was some reference in one of the memos about recommended or highly recommended testing for rates in county. Where does that factor in?
So we're not in a position yet where I feel we could institute a testing program for our student athletes as a requirement for their participation, whether it be daily or weekly. And this is something, in speaking with other superintendents, we're all struggling with. That we would love to, and some of us have access to testing, and we're one of the districts that does. However, we've articulated already to our community that we're utilizing that testing for a very specific purpose. So now to take those tests and to prioritize our student athletes being tested on some sort of routine schedule, we would exhaust our supply of tests pretty quickly, depending on whatever schedule we were to put them in. So my position is that we'll include some of our student athletes in our routine testing of students that we're implementing on a bi-weekly basis. But that we're not yet of the position where we should say we're going to exclusively test them and have it potentially come at the expense of the testing we were planning to do with the rest of our student body. So if we have access to more tests, which I'll pursue, we very well may be able to implement a more rigorous testing protocol for our student athletes. But I'm just not there yet, John, in that we'll have that level of testing available to us. And in speaking with my colleagues, they weren't either. Some of the districts we read about who have testing programs in place elsewhere in the state have established relationships with local hospitals. So I read about a few districts down on Long Island, what they were doing, to allow student athletes to participate. But then when I read, between the lines and went on their website, it seemed like these were schools that had already established a testing program with a local entity, whether it be a hospital or some other testing agency, that they had immediate access to. And we're just not there. We've pursued that. We, several, you've heard me speak about this in the fall. We just weren't able to establish that with anybody in our area.
So how are we going to determine which schools are also following the same protocols, and will we be playing the people that are having the same protocols?
Generally, yes. This is similar to what we did in the fall. There's at the section level. So there's several different groups that are involved in this. Department of Health, obviously us at a local level, and then at section level, they play a primary role in helping us coordinate what the protocols are that must be followed on site. And what any further restrictions that may be in place. And the section's already imposed some of those or stated what some of those restrictions are going to be. Just as an aside, as an example, no, there will be no fans allowed. Unlike the fall, the fans were allowed. It was limited, but they were allowed. The section's already determined that no fans will be allowed for competition through basketball season for us.
None, zero, not even 2 parents per player?
No.
None.
No. The only caveat is the potential. I don't believe there was a final decision on this made, providing our seniors with an opportunity to have a senior night where their families would be, 2 of their parents or 2 guests would be allowed to attend that game. So designating one game as senior night where the kids could have 2 of their family members come or 2 guests come. So they could be recognized similar. I hesitate to say similarly to how we've done in previous years. Obviously, that's looked much different for athletic contests and prior to COVID. But just to answer your question, Margaret, the athletic directors are working together to establish what the assurance is going to be between the 2 schools. So we have a sense of confidence in the fact that whatever school we're competing against is following the same protocols and guidelines that we are. And I would say that I felt largely that went really well in the fall. It was a similar process in the fall. And I say largely because there were a few instances where we were concerned about whether or not visiting teams were honoring quite to the extent of the agreement of health and safety protocols that were established and agreed upon. And Mr. Goddard at the time was very helpful in addressing that, where we didn't feel that a visiting team was, but I don't want that to interfere with our our discussion tonight. And really the spirit of it was that I would say 95% of the matches honored all the guidelines that were in place.
I have a question. Does this mean, or do you expect that the guidance for arts and music and other extracurricular activities will be adjusted as well? And are we sort of planning for that, or are we going to wait until we hear from the state?
I would say in the background, we're planning at an administrative level of what would be necessary or what we would need to do to facilitate performances or opportunities for our students in the realm of the performing arts, but nothing yet has changed from the state guidance. However, we would expect that would naturally follow. We don't see how we could open up athletics and not open up now opportunities for the performing arts. But until the state guidance changes, we can't formally do anything.
So the code of conduct, and let me just start with, I definitely want this to happen so people don't think this is negative, but the new code of conduct that they had to cite as athletes, on the papers you sent us, it said that there should be a hierarchical structure for oversight and addressing violations established and implemented. Is that in that new code of conduct? Because that wasn't attached to what we got.
No, so that it's not. There's nothing essentially in writing that would establish what the structure is if there's concerns or questions related to it. But I would go back to our school reopening plan that athletics is merely an extension of what happens during the regular school day. So if there's any questions or concerns related to our students' ability to meet our expectations and what's been outlined as the expectations for them to participate in athletics, that is a matter that becomes referred to the administration. In the athletics case, Mr. Romanino, potentially Mrs. Sniffen, would be involved in reviewing what the particular issue is and addressing it with our student athletes. And if there's any concern with their ability to participate while following these guidelines, the administration has the ability to exclude those students from practice or from competition.
So right now, there are no consequences if they don't want to wear masks or if they have a party on the weekend or whatever. There's none of that in writing.
I would have to refer back to our regular athletic code of conduct. I mean, as far as mask wearing, if it's on campus, there are consequences. Our students are expected to be masked on campus. The code of conduct that they're signing, that the Department of Health has provided to us, reaffirms that they will be following these guidelines. And as far as if they're, engaging in any gatherings of any sort outside of school, again, they've signed a code of conduct that's indicating that they won't. With that, if those matters are brought to our attention, we would have a responsibility to pursue it because they're putting not only themselves, but anybody who
Right.
they're competing with or against at greater risk.
Right. I mean, this is more than your regular, we'll look the other way if we hear about it. This is life and death for 450,000 people in this country. And, it says right here in best practices that we should have a hierarchy of consequences. We really don't.
I disagree. We have a hierarchy of consequences that we can implement anytime for any of our student athletes that's outlined in our code of conduct, everything from a warning all the way through an out-of-school suspension from school. Again, athletics are merely an extension.
But not specific to these protocols, not
No.
specific to COVID.
No, but it doesn't need to be in order for us to implement a consequence, that our students, wherever they are participating, as long as it's a school-sponsored activity, that they are subject to the Haldane Code of Conduct.
Okay.
And just to extend that, if they're engaging in behavior that's determined to be unsafe, and this is where you'll see in our code of conduct language at times is purposely broad enough because
Right.
it can't be written in a way to encapsulate every scenario or every situation that may encounter. It encapsulates the fact that if you're engaged at school or in school sponsored activities and you're engaging in unsafe behavior that could impact you or could impact your other students or other staff, that the school administration has the ability to intervene and to assign consequences for it. I do just want to, say though, there's nothing that we observed through the fall, and there's nothing that we have observed through their workouts thus far this school year in the winter months to suggest that our students aren't taking this seriously and that
Right.
our coaches aren't taking it seriously. And we're certainly over the last few days between our administrators and our coaches who are attached to this have tried to impress upon our students the privilege that this is, and that, as with any privilege, it can be taken away. So I feel our kids and our coaches have earned the opportunity to do this. In many ways, they're serving as the example, as I feel our student athletes did in the fall. And the more we can demonstrate that we can safely participate and engage in this way, the more opportunities that we'll have to do so. And I think that's something that everybody really craves right now. Agreed.
And I told you, I went to that football game and they stopped me at the gate. I was not allowed in. They
Right,
had
I
no idea
remember.
who was. And that was exactly what should have happened. It's just, it's different now. There are new strains out there. There are different,
Definitely.
different things that could happen. But of course, we can't predict the future. We couldn't predict on Monday that they were going to change it by Wednesday.
Right.
So we just have to have enough in place to make sure that everybody really is on the same page, that we need to be so safe.
I agree, Margaret. I think you've seen, and I've tried to illustrate in some of the background information that I've provided the board is as much as we, I think, want to have all of our I's dotted and our T's crossed with this, that, the decision to do this was somewhat unanticipated. And not only was it unanticipated, it came with another organization, that'd be our local Department of Health, now playing some level of oversight in it. And I empathize with with our partners at the county level, because from the public health perspective, they're trying to, they don't want it to, they don't want to be in a position where they're preventing kids from having this opportunity any more than we do necessarily. But from a public health perspective, they're trying their best to put some procedures in place, have some assurances, become familiar with what the school's level of oversight is and will be, so that they can have a sense of confidence that it's not going to lead to any additional spread because of the risks, everything you had already mentioned, new strains and such. And mind you, I just want to qualify that the County Department of Health is supposed to be monitoring through this time, that if they feel at any time there is increased risk because of a strain or whatever, whatever may come up, that they can shut us down. And they have that authority to do it. And similarly, locally, if we see something that we feel is of concern in putting students at greater risk, we can shut it down. So I feel confident that there's multiple entities, including myself, or people who are looking at this through a critical lens to determine, and if there's any sign that this isn't safe, that we'll intervene, whether it be at the school level or whether it be at the county level.
Is there, I was reading that whole section about the insurance and the county. Is there some liability that the school has by saying, yes, we're moving forward?
The school always has a level of liability when our kids are engaging, or when our kids come onto campus each day. So we're liable for a lot, if not everything that happens on our campus. The most important part is any potential liability covered by our insurance company. And in this case, our insurance will cover us in the event that something happens as it relates to COVID and our kids playing basketball or volleyball or football.
So this refers to volleyball, football, and basketball.
Correct.
The seasons will be through the beginning of March?
Yes. So I'm sorry, I don't have our seasons up in front of me, but generally we're now in winter, which goes until the second week of March. And then there's the fall 2 season. That's really, I would say, spring 1.
Right.
So that would be volleyball and football. That will occur from mid-March. And I apologize for when the end date is. I believe that's running up until about mid to late April. And then spring, I was going to say spring 2. Spring will begin. Which will be lacrosse and baseball and softball. That will start at the end of April through, I believe, the first week of June.
So each sport is going to get about 6 weeks?
Generally, this season that we're in right now will be the most truncated. But yes, each sport generally has about 6 weeks. There is overlap and the section was good with this. Eric's been working really hard. As you know, we have a lot of multiple sport athletes. I just wanted to mention this, who if our football team's playing and lacrosse season's starting, that has a significant impact. And remember, we don't have really high numbers in some of our sports, so we don't want to see another season beginning the reason now we have to forfeit games in the season that we're in. So Eric's been really great about working with the other ADs and the section to lobby because there were a lot of perspectives out there about how long each season should be and what it should be. And I would say, for a section that involves close to 90 schools, some very small and some very large, I think we arrived at something that's fair for everybody. But yes, each section is about each season is about 6 weeks, and there's, I believe, no more than 1 week overlap between any one season ending and one season beginning. And of course, as one season's ending, we're wrapping up games, and as the other season's starting, it's mostly practices. So the section's also modified practice rules. So the practices, just as an example, that our basketball players have can count to a point if they're participating now in a fall 2 sport. So if we have a girls
Right.
basketball player who's playing volleyball, she doesn't have to worry about getting a certain threshold of practices in order to compete, because the games are going to come a
Right.
little sooner. So sometimes that's an issue.
Right.
So yeah, those details are being worked out, or have largely been worked out between the athletic directors at the sectional level.
And no postseason, no state.
No, state competitions were canceled even for the spring now. So the
Right.
last season, spring, that was just announced yesterday or the day before. I don't believe there'll be a postseason. If you recall, in the fall, we did, for soccer, for example, the section did allow a regionalized kind of postseason play. It wasn't for anything. It wasn't for a sectional championship. There just was an opportunity to play for an additional week. And for our, and it was localized. So our soccer team could play Peekskill
Right.
and whatnot. It was just to get a couple of extra games in. I don't know if we'll see anything like that. My sense is we won't, but it's not attached to any section championship or state championship or league championship. I know there's some lobbying, I believe, in particular among football, to try to do something. I just don't know if it'll come to fruition. But as it pertains to tonight, I don't know if it's I don't know how far you want me to go into it.
Right. What about our teams that are comprised of Haldane students and Garrison students, Haldane, Garrison, Putt Valley, Henhud? What about
Yeah.
those teams?
So first of all, there's no modified sports.
So we're
Uh,
just approving varsity and JV.
JV. And then we have some of our mergers or some of our students who participate at other schools. So they're playing a sport that we just don't have enough students to field to have our own team. So those students are still eligible to play for those schools, as long as those schools have approval to play that particular sport. And I think by and large, most schools are approving this all sports with the exception of wrestling. And wrestling, as you can imagine, it's just there's I think most schools are moving towards approving it, but it gives many great pause as it relates to the potential for that to spread. And then there's also concerns with the mask requirement with wrestling. And the safety even of that. And if you've, ever, I don't know, not everybody's a grappler, if you will, but if you've ever tried to exercise, do something of high intensity with a mask on,
Yeah.
whether it be running or anything else, it becomes quite difficult to breathe. There's different performance masks and whatnot. Again, that's a little bit beyond me, but those are things that are being discussed as it pertains to wrestling.
Yeah, we're lucky we don't have a wrestling
Yes,
team and have to deal with that issue.
I was quiet in many of my meetings this week because that's presenting a more significant issue and obstacle for schools. And obviously for us right now, that's not something we have to be concerned about.
And one last tangential question. If there's no spectators involved,
Mhm.
is one person going to be allowed to broadcast it live? Or
Yeah,
how is
so
that going to work?
Yeah, so we took steps in the fall to contract with Local Live, which is an entity that does streaming of high school sports. It's a local organization that does so. And you may recall last winter, it was almost a year ago, with our girls basketball team, we had
Right.
they were playing in a big regional game at that point. We were playing Millbrook, that's our regional game. And we coordinated to have the camera system in. Now there's schools who do that all year long for their games. And we took that step. Mr. Goddard had worked on this in anticipation, or I guess unanticipated fall season that we had,
Right.
but wanting to make it available to families who would participate. The thing we're getting held up on, and we're still working on this, is that in order to broadcast all games, let's just say from our gymnasium for basketball, just because that's what's most relevant, there's certain infrastructure upgrades that we have to make for them to set up a permanent or more permanent camera setup in the gym, as opposed to last year when we just contracted with them for that one game.
Right.
They came in, they set up the stands, and that was all worked out. What we're trying to move towards is, again, is a more permanent camera set up, so all games could be broadcast. So I do have to check in on the status of that project. That was something that Leah, Tim was working on with the group from Local Live. And I do know we had some wiring and whatnot that we had to run in order to get the camera system. There were two. One was going to be down at the field, which isn't as relevant right now for now spring sports.
2
And
weeks.
yeah, and the other was for the gymnasium. So I'd be happy to provide the board with a status update on that. I'm not sure quite where that is right now.
So in the meantime, will someone be allowed to Facebook Live or something just to share with those parents?
I'm comfortable, saying we're going to try to work out whatever we need to, so our families will have an opportunity to see their kids compete, and their friends will as well. The issues that we just have to be wary of is any other applicable policy that may apply. I don't think it'll be a hurdle for us. I think other districts are faced with this. We were anticipating, something along these lines. So I'd like to see us just make sure we have the Local Live setup ready to go. But if not, I can assure you we'll do our best to make sure that, we have given our families an opportunity to see their kids playing.
And the cost of that is
So with
gonna
all
be,
due respect, could we limit this conversation? It's 8:30. We already met for 2 hours this week. Could we limit this conversation to the information we need to pass this action? These are all important questions, but this is a lot of stuff that's not really related to what the board needs to decide tonight, I think. And I can be overruled, but.
Are you comfortable with that? Can we move along?
that was the last question, making sure that our parents are going to get to see.
Sure. The cost you had asked me about, I think was somewhere around $12,000 for us to establish the contract with Local Live. They have a contract through BOE, so it is aidable. That would be a recurring cost. And that's something I will say with respect to Peggy's question, if the board wants to have a more extended dialogue about some of the particulars related to athletics, I'm happy to have Mr. Romanino provide a report or make himself available to the board at our next meeting on the 23rd to talk through some of these questions or any additional questions that the board may have about what will be fall season 2 and whatever comes after that in the spring.
No, that would be fantastic. I just had one clarifying question. So the requirement is for there to be a code of conduct, but it's your opinion that the code of conduct that we have that exists already encompasses everything that we need to meet the policy.
I'm sorry if I wasn't clear, Peggy. Our students did sign off on a code of conduct that was specific to the expected behaviors that they would exhibit at practice, reaffirming that they'll follow guidelines, also reaffirming that they'll follow appropriate guidelines, public health guidelines outside of school as well. That was listed and stated as a code of conduct. And we provided that to our student athletes yesterday at practice. And we said that in order to practice today or thereafter, we will need this back from you. Both you and your parents have to affirm it. Margaret, I had interpreted Margaret's question as far as what would the consequences be if not.
That's it.
Those are not outlined in that code of conduct, but I feel comfortable saying that our current code of conduct, our regular student code of conduct, alludes to engaging student behavior, any behavior that's deemed to be unsafe, and putting themselves or other students at risk. Certainly, if we were to find, whether it be at a practice or otherwise, that our students were engaging in unsafe behavior, that our regular code of conduct would apply. And I would say that this is some of the, potential issues that come up when you have an organization like a local Department of Health who does not know about our school and the operations and things we have in place at our school, scrambling to put together guidance so that they could have peace of mind that our kids are being safe. But there's definitely areas of overlap. So our Department of Health did not consult with our schools because they didn't have time to when they created this guidance. So there's a couple things in here I would say, look, we already have guidance on this. We have, or we have our own protocols, or we have guidance from the New York State Education Department. It's just not their ballpark. They're just, they're working with their attorneys to say, okay, if kids are able, if it's our decision to make kids, to give kids the opportunity to play, what would we want to see? Not knowing at all what may already be in place at these school districts. So it's repetitive. I personally didn't think it was, I think in the optics of having our kids and having our kids kind of somewhat memorialized, you're gonna be safe in these ways was important. But I don't, if our kids were being unsafe in any way, I didn't see any limitation to our ability to intervene.
So that's a helpful distinction, right, in terms of the hierarchy for consequences and then what they find. I think that's a useful, for me, it's a helpful distinction and bit of information. Thank you.
Yep.
Any more questions or comments for Dr. Benante? Okay, any communication from the public? If there's anybody, do we have any participants? If anyone would like to communicate with us, you are welcome to do so via the chat feature. And we'll move into the approval action. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Platt.
Yes, just Dr. Benante, before I read it, can I just clarify the authorization or the resolution that I have references modified? I should pull modified out of that.
We should. Thank you.
And how about ice hockey?
We should also, and I think we, in setting this, we said just put everything in case anything changes between yesterday and today. So I apologize, Catherine. I should have made note of that to you.
So I'm moving modified and ice hockey, and then I'll read it.
Thanks, Catherine.
Sure. Thank you. Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves student participation in the following high-risk sports, subject to strict adherence to the guidelines and protocols established by state and local health authorities, as well as the rules of Section 1 of the New York State Public High School Athletic Association: boys basketball, junior varsity and varsity; girls basketball, junior varsity and varsity; volleyball, junior varsity and varsity; football varsity; and boys lacrosse, junior varsity and varsity.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Do we have no girls lacrosse this year?
I am not sure. I would have to ask Mr. Romanino about the status of girls lacrosse. I do recall we were looking to establish a team. With respect to tonight's action item and given the timing of when that occurs, we can have a separate resolution on the 23rd, and it wouldn't interfere with their ability to practice. So I'm sorry if we missed that.
I'll just say that my understanding of this resolution is that it's really a statement of support for our superintendent, that we're putting our trust and faith that him and his team will make the right decisions for our students, which I believe in a way this resolution is a bit of an outlier, because I feel like Dr. Benante and his team have been making challenging decisions for our students for about a year now, and we place our faith in him and his team to do so. So this is just a reinforcement, in my opinion, of that fact.
Thanks, Jen.
Okay, are we ready to vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is there any further communication from the public?
Our public
Any board
disappeared.
questions? Dr. Benante, any final thoughts?
No, just thank you for your time this evening.
That they can make a motion to adjourn. May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Good. Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Have a good night,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you.
Aye.